afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum. Not a things I'd like to see because, well, I'm not particularly invested in this, but still I figured I'd come with my thoughts on the subject matter, which is a third Axis faction, which a lot of people keep bringing up. I mean, the Allies got 3 factions. A lot of people seem to think, Axis must have 3 factions, obviously, because, we got up, apparently. I don't really agree with that assessment in particular, since they've yet to get the 2 current Axis factions to function properly in terms of balance. I'm not particularly, a huge supporter of then adding in a third one. They might actually end up just doing the same mess with, like, the first 2. So, I mean, just already I'm sort of a bit as, apprehensive. But then, of course, people then suggest the factions. And you know what they always tend to suggest? It's like either Deutsches Afrika, and you just gotta go, what's wrong with you? Have you been sunbathing in the Sahara Desert? They're completely out of line. They got nothing to do with the current of the scope, which is 1944-45, which also automatically excludes the Italians, which tend to be also surprisingly common sort of brought up topic. The Italians? Wait, what? Have you been drinking too much moldy wine? Or spoiled wine? Again, just doesn't make sense. And then you get the Japanese, which is, again, I mean, they did fight. The problem is, the only time they sort of really fought the Surge for that period, they got absolutely steamrolled. I mean, they just wouldn't fit in. They weren't really an army that could sort of fight on the same level as the Western armies. They'd have to bring in so much experimental prototypes equipment for it to make sense. You might as well be making company of Wolfensteins and just, get it done with anyways. So again, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, the one sort of people never seem to point out, which, would make much more sense if you're not going for German faction anyways, is, the Hungarians. But even then, you'd have to bring up so much German equipment for it to really fit in. And at that point, you might as well then, why not just make another German faction, at which kind you sort of point back to square one, which is, can Relic do that? And of course, you might say, well, Dane, don't you have a suggestion of a functional German faction? And, well, finally asking now, I do. My thought would be, looking into that little bit, which is called 1945, sort of late war, very late war, in fact, the whole thing's falling apart there, and sort of base it off the German Panzerkampfgruppe concept there, which is sort of what the Panzer Division sort of anno 1945 was being based around there. Also, very importantly, what also be not looking for is Wunderwaffen. No Jagdtigers, Sturmtigers, elephants, none of that really huge crap which really doesn't sort of make any kind of impact. It's just absolutely too impractical, too over-specialized. It's just absolute pain to balance for that, cutting off the whole Wunderwaffen thing. So rather, my faction, which would be called the Panzerkampfgruppe, or Kampfgruppe Deutschland, or something like that, you could call it if you sort of get a bit, artistic and poetic, would, be sort of rather try and focus around that. It would sort of, try to hit the idea of a more mobile unit, sort of mobile faction. Not a lot of support weapons in that sense. It was sort of more reliant on light vehicles, but in a more functional sense that the Oberkommando West. It would sort of, I suppose, take a bit of inspiration from the Panzer Elite, but unlike the Oberkommando West, which kind of made it like a worse Panzer Elite, this would be like a much, much better one because of a few certain things. For starters, there'd be sort of a lot more synergies actually built in. Certain units would be made to work with other units specifically. For example, the base unit would be the Schützen, because, well, Panzer Grenadier is already taken, so gotta go with Schützen. A sort of 4-man infantry squad that can be upgraded with squad leaders of different types, sort of gives different sort of bonuses and, well, additional upgrades, equipment. For example, a Panzer Grenadier squad leader would give access to assault rifles and a bit more firepower that way. You could go for the Pioneers, which would give a minesweeper, but not minesweeper, basically just smoke grenades and some other abilities. They're just allowed to spot mines and deal with them. Not to cut wire, though. That'll be left for other measures, and they'd also start out with a Panzerjäger infantry squad, 4-man squad with a Panzerschreck, the ability to lay down mines. As a sort of veterans up, they'd sort of get the ability to sort of allow them to further hunt tanks down. Also, no veteran to fleet, none of that malarkey. And finally, there'd also be an LMG squad, sort of like a Maxim, but balanced. So smaller, not quite as potent, but at the same time, it had one thing, and that's also where was sort of the initial sort of example there of synergies would play in, because any unit that's under fire from the LMG team, the Schützen team would get a bonus against it. That way you'd be encouraged to sort of work the 2 units together. Plus, it also has sort of a heavier suppression for a shorter period of time in case your opponent really does decide to blow up. Yeah, you can sort of just go, all right, Jürgen, let it rip. And so just, go to belt fit mode, I suppose you could call, and just sort of really fire away there. But that would just sort of be for the smaller bursts that just sort of halt a sort of human wave assault, otherwise it would sort of be lower suppression and decent damage, but again, it would sort of really be just meant to work together with the Schutzen. That way, again, that'd be sort of the first sense there of cooperation, synergy, combined arms. But of course, it's not all of it. I mean, that'd just be the first bit. In terms of sort of force organization, we're looking at sort of the American sort of diamond shape. You got a tier 1, sort of broad tier 2, and then a tier 3. Basically sort of going up like that. Cheap, straightforward. Again, it's what the rest of the game sort of balance around, so I figure I might as well aim for it, though of course there'd be some larger changes. It would flop on the Panzer idea, but then having both of the tier 2 structures sort of be more about light vehicles, but they'd be centered around one specifically. One structure would be around the 251 half-track, which could be upgraded to a mortar half-track, flak drilling, or an ambulance. There'd be an Unteroffizier, which could sort of hand out orders to infantry, boosting them that way. No auras or debuffs, just sort of more positive buffs of your own men for brief periods of time, that way encouraging cooperation that way. And also 250 scout car, sort of based on the 250 half track, but bit more sort of suited for more all-terrain going, also giving sort of more mobile element. Again, sort of be mobile firepower. That's sort of what the Panzerkampfgruppe would be about, not slugging up, but sort of outmaneuvering element, bringing down a lot of firepower in short areas, and then either moving forwards or pulling back. Of course, the half-track would also help with that. It would be able to suppress and sort of assist there in sort of its normal variant. It would be sort of quite small temporary boost to troops about it. That way, again, further increasing synergy and combined arms through that. Then you'd have the other structure, which would be centered around the 234 heavy armored car. That which, of course, the 234-2, aka the Puma, is based on. But you'd have the 234-1, sort of the main one there, sort of as a separate unit, but it would then have synergies with the 234-3 and -4, which is basically sort of the variants for the cannon, and the Pak 40. The cannon variant would sort of be the basic one, and then the Pak 40 would be what you're upgraded for. So in that sense, one structure was sort of more about working with the infantry, sort of making the most out of that, whereas the other one was just more about, bringing up more vehicles, more equipment with the scout cars there, more mobile firepower, but at the same time, not quite so much the sort of cooperation with the infantry. The cannon variant would be able to sort of, shoot regularly, a bit like a Stuki, just not overpowered, but also barrage, regular, and smoke. And the Pak 40 variant would just be sort of good at shooting up tanks, though of course again not frightfully durable, and again lacking a turret. Again, sort of you have to sort of use it carefully. There'd also be a 250 half-track, just again for sort of a bit of mechanized infantry play, and you'd also get the Aufklärer infantry squad, sort of a 4-man squad that can call in artillery and mark targets. Fun, I know. And again, the also key would be, no more than 4-man infantry squads. Again, sort of low numbers. This is like Germany. Manpower is a serious issue. So no one bigger than there. No one bigger than there. Very important. Very, very important to keep in mind there. Further on, other issues. So then, of course, you need to sort of get into the final tier, which is sort of like the bigger tier. Gets access to the Panzer Pioneers, a sort of elite sort of pioneer unit, access to bundle grenades, MG42 they can fire on the move, 4-man squad as well, can fix up stuff but can also clear obstacles, a bit similar to how the British sappers with their destroy car ability can do as well, sort of more meant for clearing up obstacles rapidly and moving ahead fast. But again, 4-man also, like to get murdered out. In fact, they not be getting a lot of received accuracy bonuses at all. So again, sort of higher casualties. Then again, further encouraging to not stand about in the fucking open or try to slug it out. And my apologies there for saying the F word, but just to further emphasize, we're sort of trying for something a bit different and a bit more, actually tactically sustainable in the longer run. Besides the Panzer Pioneers, you'd have a late model Stu G, which would have a coaxial machine gun, better frontal armor, and some different abilities, including the ability to fire an HE round, sort of just hit targets that way, but also fire a single smoke round for a bit of support that way. And just overall different veterancy. You'd also have access to the Panther Model G, the latest Panther there before things absolutely went tits up. Would be roughly the same as the other Panthers, just, standing out with all the armor buffs on the top there. Veterans would not be centered around again. No more durability. Less health, I suppose, because again, overall just one scheme, but just overall a lot of firepower there. No Panzer IVs. No Panzer IVs there. Not a lot of them there, so they were sort of going around. And again, you're trying and distance yourself from the other factions a bit more. And then finally, you have the Grille Model M, a sort of short-range support gun. sort of based on the heavy infantry gun. And, well, you can basically consider it like a mix between the S-6 and the Sturmpanzer IV. Lightly armored, can shoot, and it can hurt a lot. So that way you sort of get a bit of their sort of variation and a bit more theme sort of centered around the light. There'd be some heavier stuff, but it would not be sort of the core of the Panzerkampfgruppe. And because, again, you sort of have sort of, be more forced towards it again, you'd have to sort of make use of the Panther or the Shoot depending how things go. You wouldn't have any sort of easy middle ground either. So again, you'd have to be like either or here as well. And then, doctrinally, I could imagine one doctrine with the Yak Panther, another with the King Tiger. We can see that one in. But that would sort of be the biggest then stuff. Otherwise, one with a Flak 88, which could act as anti-tank, artillery, and anti-aircraft, though it wouldn't be able to shoot through terrain. To sort of make up for that, you can see flak feelings and some other bits there as well. So that sort of roughly covers it. I mean, if people are interested, of course, I can sort of try and make a more in-depth video, but that's sort of roughly how I see it again, sort of centered around, the 1944 sort of Panzer unit. And again, with synergies, a lot of firepower, but also a lot of mobility and not a lot of sort of durability in those senses. You need to sort of stay swift, mobile, hit left and right, and not sort of try to slug it out with the enemy under most circumstances. And also, again, centered around, again, light vehicles like the half-track in one way or the other, 251 or the 250, but also, scout cars and the likes. Not a lot of static support weapons, in fact, pretty much next to none, except perhaps closely call the light machine gun team there, MG32, 44, whatever, that sort of suits your ideas. But again, for that, I think you could overall get an interesting German faction that, again, plays differently from the other, provides a different play style, encourages non-cheesy play and not just spamming stuff, because you'd actually be losing out on benefits of the faction, which is, what we in layman's terms call clever. At least I like to think it's clever. And overall, just something that stands out and should be fun to play with, but also fun to play against. So, yeah, that roughly covers it. If you sort of want a more in-depth sort of video on it, I suppose I can make that if there's really demand for it. But otherwise, if you liked it, do let me know in the comments. And of course, do let Relic know it somehow. I suppose they probably won't be seeing it actually in the game. Just, a thought there anyways on how I would do it if I had to. Which I probably won't or will. But there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Learned something from it. Gave it your own thoughts and who knows what else. Of course, you just liked it. You like to see it, of course. Like, share, subscribe. Talk about it everywhere and so on. And again, I just, wanted to vent a bit on the whole, third Axis army bit. There again, there's a lot of, quite frankly, silly ideas. And so I just figure, if I'm going to call it silly, I might as well pitch in my own idea, which is probably just as silly, but at least it tries, to fit into the rest of the game and actually, make some sense again. No Wunderwaffen, and again, some more coherent army concepts, which again, design-wise, should make sense. So, there you go. Again, hope you liked it. Cheers.